I went to visit a friend to drown my sorrows, and I drove there. We had a few drinks. We had a few more drinks. We had some more drinks. And then I decided to drive home. I was caught and I was taken to Queen's Park Police Station, where I spent a very, very uncomfortable night in jail. It was horrible. I was completely claustrophobic with it. Wow, it was really awful. I felt uncomfortable. I felt alone. I was terrified. And I mean, that led to going to magistrate's court, where I had got a lawyer, and he had said to me, Cindy, there's a chance that you could go to jail.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to season 2 of the podcast of the International School of Intuition and Healing. And what's different today is instead of Cindy doing all the questioning, she's on the side of being questioned. Well, not that serious. Cindy's going to be telling her story today. And how this came about was we were actually at an alumni meeting and discussing Cindy's role at the school and the influence she has on the consciousness of the school as well. And thought it might be really useful and helpful for everybody who's really involved in the school and in the community of the school to understand who's the person behind the vision of the school, the vision of community, the vision of unity consciousness, and how did that all start? And here we are. We are going to have this lovely interview with Cindy. My name's Tada Nightingale. Cindy was my mentor when I did the energy healing course. How many years ago was that? I think that was about 5-6 years ago.
Something like that, yes.
Yeah. And I must say, having you as a mentor changed everything. A big part of the school's course is having that mentorship. And I think when you really are working with someone who's been in the trenches, it gives you real perspective. And I don't think I would have been able to make it through the way that I did not having you as a mentor. And I always feel that way about you and how you played a massive role in my transformation journey. So I'm honored to be here to learn a little bit more about yours and where it started for you. So here we are. I've introduced you a little bit, but I think it would be better for everyone to hear your side and you introduce yourself. So Cindy, please take it away.
Thank you, Taryn. And yeah, we've walked a long journey together, and I'm excited to have you question me today and answer some of those questions, because it wasn't all plain sailing, and I've definitely been in the trenches and a definite specific dark night of the soul. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Cindy Cromble-Holme. I'm the director of the International School of Intuition and Healing. I'm a mentor first and foremost. I'm a coach. I'm a tutor. I'm a friend. And I do some leadership training as well, and sort of thought leadership as opposed to leadership training. So I do thought leadership, which is a new venture for me at the moment. But I sit here mainly in my capacity as kind of the one who holds the energy of the school, because that's how I see it. I think I hold that energy of the school.
That's true. That's definitely true. It's interesting when you talk about your new venture in terms of thought leadership, right? A lot of how we actually end up holding energy when you take a leadership position is in consciousness, right? And a big part of that is how are we thinking? How are we holding and playing and working and evolving our consciousness?
Absolutely. And I guess if we're not doing that in our leadership or in our day-to-day lives, I'm not sure what the benefit is of doing the work.
And reading a little bit about your story, Cindy, there was definitely a clear shift in consciousness for you, right? From where your journey started to what actually led you to being where you are now as the director of the school. So would you mind telling us where did it start for you? Where did you start looking at your own consciousness, and maybe even just in little bits, before you moved into the space where you are now?
There are different parts or containers of my story, and I want to talk about kind of growing up a little bit and take you a little bit back to some of my childhood, because I think it's important that certain things happened that kind of created a need to numb. Um, and I want to talk about neurodiversity and my own neurodiversity in terms of fortunately having a very forward thinking mother in the 80s who actually in the late 70s tested me for dyslexia and learning difficulties. And I was I was actually diagnosed with dyslexia, a certain type of dyslexia. I was never diagnosed with ADHD, but I think my mother knew that I was ADHD because she used to make sure that I did enough exercise to be completely exhausted. And the other thing that I really respected about my mother, against all odds, kept me off medication um, for both dyslexia and ADHD. And today I'm really grateful for that. But it didn't make the journey growing up, coming from a high achieving family. Both my sisters were prefects and super bright. And then kind of coming along and needing to fill those shoes. But my parents were very fortuitous. They moved me to a school in a different area. They couldn't afford to send me to a private school. But really supported me. My mother really supported me. I mean, if I think back, and I think about how I learn now from audio and visual, we didn't have that then. My mother actually read all my textbooks onto those old tape recorders, so I could listen and read my textbooks at the same time. And I'm really grateful for that, because she really instilled in me that I wasn't stupid and that I would make it. And at the age of 13, they taught me to read and write from scratch at extra lessons. My father had to work on cars on the weekend to pay for the extra lessons. My mum had to do extra sewing such that I could, get the same as GCSEs or, a matric pass. And actually I finished school I could have gone to university. I could have become a teacher. And in there probably lies the first story around why didn't you become a teacher, and why did you go into hospitality? And I just think it's really funny that teaching is what I really love doing. But at that early age, I was an entrepreneur, and I was signed up to go to teacher training college, and I just had to go and do my medicals. And somebody came around to our careers guidance day and spoke about hospitality and holiday inns and an apprenticeship at holiday inns. And I ticked all the boxes. I was a good leader. I was a good organizer. I liked people, like all these skills. And I remember going home and sitting my parents down, which I did from time to time, and said, there's a change of plan. And they were like, what is your change of plan? I said, I don't want to become a teacher. I don't want to be poor. Mom is a teacher and she's never made enough money to suit her lifestyle. I want to be in hospitality. I want to be a manager. I want to be able to earn lots of money. And if I go into teaching, that's not going to happen. So we applied, and out of, I think, 1,000 applications, there were 20 of us that were chosen to do an apprenticeship. We only had to go to school 6 weeks of a whole year. Perfect for me. And everything else was vocational. It was absolutely perfect. And there I started my career in hospitality, and just absolutely excelled. I could think around a whole different things happening at once because I was hyperactive. I had loads and loads of energy. And also, unbeknown to me, is I could read what people needed both employees and customers alike. I knew what people needed from me. And I guess my intuition really came into fruition in the early days of hospitality.
Wow. I did not know any of this actually. How beautiful, how supportive your parents were when you were a little girl. That's actually really lovely to hear. I'm quite interested in to just backtrack a little bit whilst this was happening for you and your mom was reading your textbooks. What was going on internally for you? How were you perceiving yourself? What was your experience at school like? How was Cindy seeing Cindy?
So Cindy was seeing Cindy through the teacher's eyes. I think I was frustrating because I was, and those of you who know me, I'm super curious. Like, why, how, that doesn't make sense. So I was always curious. And then, of course, I was a challenge because I was quite disruptive in a class, being able to sit still, concentrate. Um, and yet I had the passion and desire to do well. So I was quite a conundrum around around school. But what was for me is when I before my parents moved me, and kind of I went from primary school where I was in class with my super bright friends who kind of played out in the world as MDs for countries of Microsoft, and top innovators for Intel, and etc etc. These were my mates, and this is the level of I guess conversations at that age. And when I went to high school, they put me into what was known as the dummy class, and most of the people were repeating what was then standard 6, which is now grade whatever it is. And there I kind of felt awful about myself. It was like, why can't I do it? I remember wanting to join the debating society and told that I couldn't because I wasn't in the clever class and only clever people could do debating. Meantime, I had done speech and drama since I was 6 years old, and I was, I could argue myself in and out of any conversation, and yet I wouldn't be able to. I was very lucky. I was good at sport, and that kind of helped. But I remember punishing the school and going, "Well, I won't run for you if you won't let me do debating. Why must I give you that if I'm not doing that?" And so my parents moved me from Northcliffe High School, for those of you who know Johannesburg, to Parktown Girls, and that was a better fit. But I still really struggled. It was really difficult for me. School was a real labor of love and hard work, and I was misunderstood, um, and that was difficult. I started drinking at a very young age to numb that. So yeah, I was drinking from the age of 14.
Yeah, it sounds like there was kind of this you say you describe it as a conundrum, but when I hear you, it sounds like you could feel this alive spirit, this person who was actually wanting a lot of life and wanting more out of life. I hear that in how you talk about the sport, the speech and drama, wanting to do debating, like being pulled forward, but then external reality and a perception of you kind of keeping you, holding you back. Would that be a fair way of describing it?
I think it was more, it didn't, and this is where my parents were really great in terms of positive mental thinking. I mean, I was still a prefect at school. I still got my colors for hockey. I did well, but phew, to get there, I mean, I remember Afrikaans was really challenging in terms of learning another language for me. And I remember like almost going for extra lessons and bribing the teacher and sitting just so I could pass, like just so I could pass. And I mean, we were also like a project school. So the grades over a period of time, it wasn't just those final exams. I wouldn't have passed if it was that. So my parents were really strategic where they put me at school with what they had. So yeah, it was, I think I was always fighting to be seen, and there was a side of me that felt less than, and that was the side I numbed.
Okay. So tell us a little bit more about that. If you started drinking at 14, what were you feeling around that time that led you to that?
I kind of knew I was different. So I mean, in terms of being intuitive, in terms of anything around spirituality, was not in my radar, although it was. Like if I speak to friends, I say, Cindy, you're always trying to solve the problems of the world or think of a deeper way of doing things, but you were never religious. But I was always in an inquiry about how do we work? What is right and wrong? What is a good way? And remember growing up in the heart of apartheid, Taryn, we could smell Soweto in those times in terms of what was going on. We could hear gunshots from time to time because Parktown was quite near central Johannesburg. So there was quite an awareness around wanting to support what wasn't right and questioning that and whatever. So it was almost more a political edge than a spiritual edge, but it kind of comes hand in hand of values and understanding of values and what was right and what was wrong. And we questioned that at our school, which I was also really grateful for because my parents were quite conservative and kind of just kept their nose out of it. So I think going to a much more politically active school or where there were more politically active parents, again, kind of put me on a little bit of a back foot because all I'd heard from my parents, and I was curious. I was curious as a child and questioned and fought with my parents a lot around apartheid at the time because I just didn't think it was right and I couldn't understand why they weren't doing anything. So there was that. And then as well as like, why can't I get the grades as everyone is? Because I can hold them in a conversation. I can do everything, but I just couldn't get the grades. But also, if you were in a survivor, you'd want me on your team because I can think outside the box. I can jump through hoops. I can make most things happen because that's what I did. And I think to this day, I still have an ability to exhaust myself by proving myself. But then I think also I needed to numb some of that bandwidth, like that bandwidth of not enough, and sort of felt a numbness through that. And I also smoked quite a lot of marijuana. At the time, it was definitely a thing, although it put me to sleep a lot. But there was definitely my drug of choice was alcohol, and I was a happy drunk. So it was part of my social ability to allow everyone to have fun and to sit talking around the fire with lots of bottles of red wine till the early hours of the morning, if not till the morning.
It's so interesting for me because it sounds like you were already doing really well, but you said you didn't really feel fully seen. Was there something where you didn't feel like you were reaching your full potential?
I didn't go to university. And my friends were at university. They were protesting. It was really at the heart of the activism. And I was working 16, 18 hours a day, at Holiday Inns, doing various different things. So I feel that I would have liked to have done that, but I also knew that hospitality was a good middle ground for me. But I think underlyingly there was something around my sexuality too. I think, as I said, there are pockets of my soul that were separated from me. And I think possibly my sexuality might have been, being I came out really late in life as being gay. And I think that was probably also going on for me at the time. Because my father and his sister fell out, um, and she was gay, and he didn't speak to her for 10 years, and I was the apple of my father's eye. So I think there were a lot of things that were on the back foot that kind of needed to be looked at.
How old were you when that happened, when your father and his sister fell out?
So during school days, so I can't remember exactly, but I would guess it was kind of the late 90s, early 80s, where there was that time. Actually, no, I was much younger than that because my grandmother used to sneak me off to go and see my aunt as a secret. So I also had secrets from my parents. So I actually got to know my aunt really well, who became a really special, integral person in my life. She became really special to me as I grew up for obvious reasons and then for not such obvious reasons. But yeah, so there were secrets, and they were quite these are all quite subtle because I was deeply loved as a child. And my parents did everything that they did the very best they could with what they had.
I hear you. It's when I listen to you, it sounds like there was a lot of complexity that you were navigating. I mean, the environment, the school environment, having actually very, really supportive parents who are trying their best to help you and support you in with the dyslexia, moving you to different schools, but then not knowing about your sexuality and you're having to hold that and then having the secrets. So it sounds like there was a lot of complexity and, like you say, nuance. So when did you become aware of that you were gay? When did that show up for you? And how did that play out in the years to come? The from 14 when you started drinking and then you got to the point of, okay, I'm going to go into hospitality. How did that play out? And where was your drinking at that time when you moved into the hospitality space? Had it become very bad?
So hospitality encouraged alcohol, just saying, like, you know what I mean? Work hard, play hard. I excelled really well at my career. I did once I'd finished my apprenticeship, I quite quickly, I always say to people that I have a really good pedigree in hospitality. I ended up in the best five-star hotel, which was those of you who remember and listening to that, my South Africa, the last hotel that I was at was at the Carlton Hotel, which was just amazing. Made friends for life there. But also I was at Mount Grace. I was at the Rosebank Hotel after Holiday Inn. So I kind of just, yeah, I came, I did really, really well. At a certain point, like I was about 24, 25, I kissed a girl and I liked it. And then we had a very secret relationship from my parents, their parents, and fell deeply in love. And yeah, that didn't end so well. And then I decided that it was time to come to London or just to travel because I was confused. I was unsure. Around my sexuality. I kind of, dare I say, to get shut down by the queer community, but I really hoped I wasn't. There was a deep side of me who really just wanted, a house, two children, a car, you know what I mean? Because all my life, in a way, I wanted to be like the Barbie doll friends that I have and the action men that were in my life who were, starting to get married and I was just different. And I'm still different, but I'm super proud of being different. I'm so grateful I'm proud, I'm different today. But in those days, wow, I wanted to be the same, but I just wasn't.
I love how the comparison you make, the action figures and the Barbie dolls, you know, how society tries to get us to morph into something. I'm really glad that you embraced your difference. So, okay, so doing really well at Holiday Inn, happy drunk, having this beautiful experience with a woman, and now you're going to London. What happened? How did you end up in London? What was the turning point that put you in?
So I had a friend of mine who they left to go and work in Scotland. Really dear friends of mine, and who still like are really close friends. And when they left to go overseas, he gave me £1 and he said, "When you get to London, call us and we'll go and travel Europe together." And so there was this pound that sat on my desk in temptation. And when I was just fed up with who am I, what is going on, it's time to travel. And I made the phone call and we met up and then we backpacked Spain and Portugal for 3 months together. And they were going back to, they had jobs in Scotland. They went back to Scotland, and I landed in London, and life changed for me. Um, it was the naughty 90s. I mean, if anyone said what were the 90s like in London, they were the best. Like, completely unmanageable. I did a lot of research. I did a lot of research into how much I could drink, even more than I was. I did a lot of research into relationships and, messy relationships with no boundaries. Um, we related drunk a lot of the time. But again, I was still a happy drunk, and we had a lot of fun. Again, I managed to get a work visa, and from there secured a job as a night manager in a really posh restaurant group, which actually lasted 33 years. It was only last year that I actually gave up the franchise to that business. But for 33 years, I was associated with this fantastic restaurant brand. And yeah, we were bought and sold a number of times. I got promoted, but the drinking continued to escalate.
Why was that?
My heart got broken a couple of times, and I think it got to a point, and I think it would be really good for us to do a deep dive into this dark night of the soul of the alcohol. And so there were various things that happened, and I might come back to those, but there was death. There was really good friends of mine immigrated to Australia. I broke up after a 3-year relationship. Um, the love of my life found their love of their life, even though we had been separated for some time. And I felt very lonely and alone, and I was struggling to connect and to meet the right people. And the drinking was escalating to not just being a happy drunk out, but coming home and drinking at home. And that then escalated to starting to drink in the mornings to cope. Work as well had got really busy, and then we actually sold off some of the business. And I'd gone to London to running 800 employees across a group, like different brands, and then we sold off some of that business. And I also, yeah, it was just, everything seemed unmanageable to me, although I was still a high functioning drunk. I didn't lose my job. I'd been promoted, and I went to visit a friend to drown my sorrows. And I drove there. We had a few drinks. We had a few more drinks. We had some more drinks. And then I decided to drive home. And I was stopped on my way. Well, somebody saw me, notified the police. And the interesting thing is of that is that I actually didn't drive that, you know what I mean? It's definitely not a thing, but I think that my alcohol content was so high in my body that I probably drank, over the limit every day because of the high alcohol in my body. But I was on a bender that night, and this friend of mine kind of tried to persuade me, but anyway, I drove home and I was caught, and I was taken to Queen's Park Police Station, where I spent a very, very uncomfortable night in jail. It was horrible. I was completely claustrophobic with it. Wow, it was really awful. I felt uncomfortable. I felt alone. I was terrified. And I mean, that led to going to magistrate's court, where I had got a lawyer, and he had said to me, Cindy, there's a chance that you could go to jail because you were so over the limit. And my life just felt as though it was really, really in an awful spot. And just prior to that, I had made connection with somebody spiritual, and I'd had a good spiritual experience. And so in that time, um, it led me to the College of Psychic Studies, where actually there was a leaflet on an angel weekend where Sue Allen was the facilitator, at somewhere called Gaunt's House, I think it was. Anyway, it was a retreat weekend away, and I booked that. And as I say, just having had a small interlude of a spiritual, like sort of being in contact with the spiritual awakening, which was around the death of a friend, that I landed up doing this workshop. And I mean, I ended up, I think my license was taken away for something like 3.5 years or 4 years. I had to do a drink drive test to reduce the sentence, like from 5 years to 3.5 years or something ridiculous. And all of this was really, really embarrassing. I was the director I was the operations director of a PLC company. They didn't send me to jail, but I got 100 hours community service, which was absolutely awful, but absolutely the right thing for me. And we used to have to go to Sainsbury's. I can't remember. There was a big Sainsbury's, and in Westbourne Grove, that's right. And we used to have to meet there, and then we would drive off and we'd be issued with our orange jumpsuits, and then we would go and do old people's gardens for the whole of the Saturday. And I thought I was going to die. But in my spirited way, I got there, I got through it. I befriended the supervisors as I would have. I would say, please just give me the schedule so we can organize that we do this in the morning and we can kind of have the afternoon off and go and eat lunch together and be in the park. And do you need me to help you with your shopping? Like, give me the list. I'll do the shopping while the band and with all the people, that were doing time, really, I guess. But it was difficult. I mean, it was, I was caught drink driving in my 6-week-old brand new Mercedes compressor.
Oh.
Oh, yes. I know, right? So, so there was a lot of pain, and there was a lot of pain because my friends were all gone, and I felt really, really alone. And it was a very difficult. It was a very difficult time. Fortunately, my job was understanding, and the CEO at the time had a similar thing happen to him, so he was quite compassionate. We sorted out the car. Somebody else got my beautiful black Mercedes, and he was so. Fortunately, he was compassionate, but the self-loathing and the self-upset with myself was really, really difficult. And so I went away. I never forget, there were a couple of things that happened. The first thing is the first weekend I was supposed to start my community service was the weekend I booked away to go and do an angel shop a weekend with Sue. And the second weekend was Gay Pride in London. And so, which was an event that I always participated in. And I was really, really didn't know what to do. So I went to the CEO of our business and I've booked this weekend. I think it's really important that I go. Can you write to my probation officer and tell them I have to work? So even then I was a chancer, which he did. And I mean, that weekend absolutely changed my life. I met Sue, and I knew straight away that she would be a good psychotherapist for me. And the reason she would be a good psychotherapist for me was by virtue of the fact is I knew she was psychic and I couldn't lie to her. So I would need to be brutally honest. Anyway, I waited 3 months from that retreat to actually get one appointment to see her. But you know, in life, sometimes you come across someone and there's that deep knowing that they are the right, you know, it was a soul contract with her. It was this deep knowing. And so I waited 3 months. And then from there, I also joined psychic development class at the college, which she was teaching. She was doing a foundation in psychic development. I joined that and I started seeing her for psychotherapy with the intention of healing the alcohol. I still drank for 6 months while in psychotherapy with her. And we looked to heal the wounding of the insecurities and this lack of self-love and putting everything else before me. We looked at that work and we did a deep dive into, you know, some of my childhood trauma. Because my parents had been so loving and good, I kind of ignored their shadow that had affected me in certain ways. So we really did a massive unpack around, you know, some of the issues around my parents, around racism, around sexuality, around and also the other thing is, which I didn't mention, my mom thought spirituality was hocus pocus. I had a grandmother, the grandmother that sneaked me off to see my gay aunt. She, you know, we you know, we realized that there were actually these aspects of myself that I desperately didn't want to get to know, but also um but also that I was hiding from them and not being my true authentic self and wanting, because of what they had done in my life, I wanted to people please them. And I would say probably one of my biggest challenges still to this day is my people pleasing. And so after 6 months, finally my father was, it was over, we were doing Christmas and New Year, we were doing my whole family was here, we celebrated as always in Wales. And then we and my parents came back to London, and I'd said to my family, my mother had told a couple of years before about my sexuality, and my sisters, actually everyone knew except my father, because I absolutely feared the rejection of my father. I loved him so much and he loved me so much. But of course, he just didn't know this whole part of me, because by then I'd had live-in lovers, and we, you know, we'd had to, like, La Cage La Folle, you know, the birdcage, where we'd have to have a spare room and everyone in the house would need to move when my parents came to visit. I mean, it was a comedy of errors. I mean, it was just like how partners put up with me to this day, I don't know, but they did. And there was this continual lying, this continual hiding who I truly was.
How old were you that time?
Wow. I was 39.
Hmm.
And I'd been going for this therapy, and I mean, it was literally, and I know for those people who are listening who are addicts, please, I was in the trenches before I told my father. I worked through a lot of stuff. I integrated a lot of my shadow. It took a lot. And eventually I told my father, and he just said, I knew. I knew from the day it happened. And I love you because you are my daughter. I love you because you are Cindy. And I'm grateful to my sister who paved a way for me to be able to do this. And it was just this beautiful, like everyone was terrified. I mean, the whole family had scattered for miles, like, and my dad and I just had this beautiful connection, and he was absolutely fine. But what that felt like was these years of lying. And I mean, he could tell me, I mean, he told me who my partners were. I didn't have to tell him. He went and I could see this and I could see that. And I think we had a big night that night with my mother, and they left the next day. And I remember I had a beautiful collection of whiskies, of Chivas Regal, of Johnny Walker Black. I was in hospitality, and I'd been gifted all these beautiful whiskies for Christmas. And I poured all, after they left, they flew back to Johannesburg. I pulled everything down the drain, and to this day, I haven't had a drink since that day.
Wow. What was it about that day for you that made you do that?
I didn't have to lie about who I was. I could be who I truly was. I didn't need to lie. I could be my authentic self.
So it's interesting. Was it what your father said, or do you think it was a culmination of things that led you to that point?
I was over ready. I was just, there comes a point when you sit there and if I carried on drinking, I would die. And if I stopped drinking, I would die. There was that, like, how am I not going, it was in my life since I was 13, 14. How, who am I without that? I think that was one of my biggest fears. Who am I without that? What would I be? The happy drunk. I mean, people go for a drink with Cindy. They don't go for a coffee. I mean, now everyone goes for a coffee, but in my head. So it was another 18 months of psychotherapy to figure that all out. So it didn't just go, oh, wow, I've given up alcohol, I'm fantastic. Really, it was the start of a journey of really working through, of which I moved up in the psychic development class. And halfway through the process, I mean, I think it would sort of been the 6 months and there were a few more months, I decided that I wanted to give up smoking by the time I was 40, and I didn't. But about 3 months after my 40th birthday, I gave up smoking. And when I gave up smoking, this extraordinary energy came out of my hands. And I remember going to the College of Psychic Studies and going to one of the tutors, what's all this business about energy in my hands? I'm a psychic, I'm not a healer, that's for all the goody two-shoes. And they went, Cindy, you're a healer. Go and sign up for the healing course, of which I did, and I had an interview. And kind of, that's where it started. So Sue Allen was my psychotherapist. She had become my, psychic development tutor. And then alongside, she kind of headed up and taught the last term of the healing course at the college. So we built a really strong relationship.
I did not know that Sue was your psychotherapist, and that is how you originally met her.
Would you like to know kind of how that then landed in the school? So so with Sue, we had kind of sort of we went on to, she took a sabbatical. We kind of then went on to once every 2 weeks, then once a month. After, I just need to tell you, she lived an hour and a half from where I lived in South London. Every single week, come rain or snow, I would get on the train, half an hour there, walk. I think the door to door was an hour and a half. So hour train, walk to her place 20 minutes, walk back, get the train. 3 hour round trip on a day. But I didn't. I think I missed once in the early days when I was a little bit, had a few little tipples and thought best not to go. But other than that, I was there every week. And so kind of it got less, and I qualified on the healing course. And so I then was coming back to South Africa. I had made a decision that I wanted to come back to South Africa. And there's a lovely little story in that too. So I just need us to keep that nugget. Sorry, audience, for keep bumping my microphone. I can't speak without my hands. So I hope it doesn't affect the sound. Anyway, we had been seeing each other less and less, and I'd qualified, and maybe I was seeing her once a month, if that. And I decided I was immigrating to South Africa, and actually probably longer. I can't remember the detail, but she was there if I needed, and I might have the odd session here and there. Anyway, I went to go and give her a gift when I left, and we had a chat, and I said to her, I'm going, this is when I arrive in Cape Town, and kind of like our final ever session type of thing. And she said, oh, I'm going to Cape Town. And I said, really? And she said, yeah, I'm going to be in Cape Town. She gave me the dates. And I said, oh, that's the week I arrive. Would it be okay at this point to maybe have dinner together? And she went, you know what, Cindy, I think from an ethical standard, it would be absolutely fine if we had a dinner together. and the rest is history. I mean, there is a story of various different things, and that's kind of where, because she was still teaching at the College of Psychic Studies in those days. So we had a dinner in Cape Town, in Camps Bay, at a lovely fish restaurant, and there we sat in Cape Town, and kind of said, well, maybe one day, we'll do some workshop. Maybe you can come over and do a workshop. Let's see what happens. But kind of the seed was planted then about maybe you can come and do some workshops. And that was the first week I arrived back, and that was in 2008.
So, just to ask you this question, so, okay, when you approached Sue and you said you're going to back to South Africa and asked her to meet for dinner, how are you feeling about yourself then, right? So what's come through is a big thing for you in your journey was self-loathing. Where were you around that? Do you feel that had been healed and that you'd transformed that?
I believe my journey had really, through doing the healing course. The healing course was a bit of a, I need to say, it took to a module for me to go, hell, this really works. Like, I kind of did it to stay out the pub, like through long teeth, it was like, I'm doing this because I'm interested in it. It's fascinating. Yeah, I was a little bit ambivalent, and then something happened at the beginning of the module. Do you remember where you do the circles of your relationship? So just for those who don't, the boundaries, yeah. And I remember drawing those circles, and I think that's when I fell apart, was realizing, because it's like, who is close to you, who is in the outer there, and then where are your acquaintances? And I realized that I had no intimate relationship, I had no intimate friendships at the time, and that the acquaintances were really on the peripheral and on the outside. And I kind of fell apart then. And that was kind of in the healing course, was like, okay, so I need to start integrating this work. I really need to start looking at what is shifting and changing. So it was that really pivoted into, and kind of, it was a point also, I think, at the psychotherapy where we had done the shadow work and the inner child work, and we were then ready to start integrating and building that self-love and self-representation. So that kind of all coincided with the psychotherapy, the outer world and the inner world, all of that coming together.
And just so the audience knows, when Cindy says it's clicked at module 4, the healing course has 6 modules, so it was quite late in the course.
No, 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 it really was like, yeah, I'm doing all of this. Yeah. And you see, the thing is I was extremely clairsentient and I was extremely clairvoyant. So I had that channel because for so long, and Taryn, we've left out some real nuggets around, first of all, my defiance to wanting to ever be spiritual, to also, the death of somebody dying of a disease, as well as the integration of things. So yeah, I think there's still a lot more to come around that within my story.
100%. How do you feel about us stopping here, Cindy, and moving forward with another episode where we go into, I think what the audience would love to know, I know I would definitely love to know, is how did that intuition that you had, you knew how to read people already, and then this friend passing away, and that leading you to Sue, how did that unfold? Because that sounds like a beautiful thread in terms of the whole spiritual awakening and moving you into this path and the path of the school and where that went. That would be lovely to know.
I've left out some really important nuggets that I feel I'm depriving you and the listeners of. So we'll see you all later.